Well, thank you so much, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the two colleagues that spoke before me. I really appreciated both of their interpretations of this particular bill and the meaning that it has. So I am here today to speak on our leader's bill, Bill C-352, that talks about amending the Competition Act and the Competition Tribunal Act to increase competition and lower prices for Canadians. Now, Madam Speaker, my husband's culture is the most Northern Coast Salish in Canada, and their nation is Homalco. And one of the things that they're very clear in, and their teachings are very clear in, is that greed is actually considered a profound illness. And if a member of their community shows a lot of greed and holding on to wealth, there's a lot of work that is done to help that person not be in that place of greed. And the reason that they feel that this is an important issue is that the core value of their community is together we are stronger. That's basically the core value. So if somebody is suffering, then it is a weight upon all of us to make sure that we lift that person up and support them in the way that they need to be supported. And unfortunately, that is not the system that we see currently in Canada. I think most Canadians know the reality that the system is rigged. It is rigged to support the very, very wealthy, the 1% people of Canada. We see this not just in Canada, but in many other countries, and we know it's extremely unfair. And what bothers me the most about how our system is rigged right now, and again, we've seen this in a lot of statistics that show that the wage earning of everyday Canadians continues to be stagnant, while the very, very wealthy are seeing huge increases in their wage earnings and their incomes. And so that tells us that everyday Canadians are going to continue to struggle because we have greed in this country out of control. And that's where we are. And so when we look at what's happening in our grocery stores right now, where people are really struggling to be able to afford the basic things that they need to feed their families and to be treated with dignity. And I know I bring this up a lot in this House, that I think there should be a bar of dignity in this country, and I believe that fits in with the teachings from the Homalco people, where it's like we understand that everybody deserves dignity. So if somebody has a strength or a weakness, we find a way to celebrate what is good and strong, and we find ways to support and love through those weak moments. And we're not seeing that right now. We're seeing a lot of people who are doing everything right. They are following the rules that they think are fair, and they see themselves falling further and further behind. And it makes me think of a lot of young people who are worried about the fact that they may not be able to afford a home, they may not be able to ever have a wage, a livable wage that will give them the ability to build the things in their life that they want to build. And so as we look at this system and acknowledge it's rigged, the worst thing that we can do is say, let's just not have a system to address that. You know, I like to believe the best in people. I tend to be a fairly trusting person. I believe in the essential good in everyone. But I also know that if you have a system that doesn't keep engaging and making sure that things are fair, there are people who will turn that system to feed themselves at the expense of other people. And that's what we have right now. We are watching people like Galen Weston walk away with multi-million-dollar raises while the workers at Loblaws can't even afford to buy groceries at the store that they work in. We're seeing more and more people struggling to pay for basic groceries when we're also seeing much higher outcomes and profits for these grocery stores. And what's frustrating is we see that there is just this out-of-touch Liberal Party that calls them in and sort of says to them nicely, can you stop raising your prices? It's really hurting the Canadian consumer. And that's sort of a talk, but it doesn't actually say, hey, this isn't fair. We're going to put something in place that makes it fair. And then we have the corporate-controlled Conservatives, quite honestly, who have 50% of their governing body are lobbyists for greedy CEOs. Like, that's who they're talking to. That's their leadership. That's who's helping them plot their own course moving forward. And that worries me because it means that everyday people doing everything right are continuing to be marginalized because our systems don't hold those folks to account. So what will this bill do? Well, the first thing it will do is actually will increase penalties for price fixing. And Madam Speaker, we all know about this. We know that sometimes prices are fixed and the consumer is paying way more than they should. And, you know, when I look at this, it just reminds me of the reality that Loblaw has recently tried to decide that instead of giving, you know, almost expired food at 50% off, they were only going to do 30% off. It's like they're nickel and diming people who are struggling and doing their best every day to get by just taking away every opportunity for something that they can afford. The other thing this bill does is it helps smaller grocery stores by protecting them against anti-competitive tactics from bigger players. Let's be honest. We all know this, especially people who are small businesses. When you've got a player in town that's really big corporation and they've got tons of resources, they can undermine you really easily. We need something in place that keeps that at a level playing field. And we know that a lot of big grocery stores, if you're within a certain radius of where they're providing their grocery stores, if you can do a lower price for the consumer, you're told you can't because it's anti-competitive. And so what happens? You have to raise your prices, even though you could give it to somebody at a lower price. That is wrong. That is those big corporate giants coming into people who are working hard, who care about their community, or trying to make things affordable and taking away their ability to do that. So this bill will fix that. It also gives the Competition Bureau more powers to crack down on abuse like price gouging consumers. This is a real thing. Now, the Conservatives will tell you that it's all just about the carbon tax. You know, when you look at the stats, and I will get to that a little bit later on, you will see the huge amount of corporate profits that we are seeing in the last little while. So even with taxes that are going up, they're still drawing in way more than they did back in 2020. That worries me, and it tells me that they are using this opportunity to mislead Canadians and tell them that they have to pay more even when they don't need to. It's because we don't have strong enough anti-competition laws in this country. And of course, the other thing it does is it will stop mergers that decrease competition and hurt Canadians. You know, we've just seen this. We saw Rogers take over Bell, and they were like, no, we promise we're not going to raise our costs. We're not going to raise our prices. What did they do? They just recently raised their prices. You know, one of the things about Canada that concerns me is we don't ever see a government, whether it be Liberal or Conservative, take on this real issue of competition and make sure that when people are getting scammed, that they do something about it. They're just too nice because they know where their money comes from. That's what I will say in this House. And it's shocking. So right now we have 5 companies for grocery stores: Loblaw, Sobeys, Metro, Costco, and Walmart. They dominate. There's little ones every once in a while, and I saw in BC that we've lost some of those small grocery stores who've been picked up from Sobeys. This is shocking. It means that when there's only those 5, they just talk to each other. How much do we want to get out of this area? How much do we want to get out of this area? There's no more little grocery store in the corner who's doing their best to keep the costs down. We can just wipe them out. That's what's happening in this country, and the consumer are paying, and the people that work the hardest are paying the most. If you're making $250,000 a year, you're not going to care if your grocery store's prices go up. But if you're only making $20,000, $30,000, and there's a lot of seniors living on that in this country, you're certainly going to feel it, and you're going to be making terrible, terrible decisions that no Canadian with any bar of dignity here could actually see taken. I want to remind everybody that margins generally increase by 1 to 2 percent points. That's been where it's been at. And now we're seeing huge. We know that the 3 largest grocery stores last year alone, in 2022, I should say, Loblaw, Sobeys, and Metro made more than $3.6 billion combined in profits. So while everyday Canadians are suffering, the reality is that we don't have a system that's going to be making it fair for everyday Canadians. So I hope everybody in this House supports this bill so that we can make things fair for Canadians, because they certainly deserve it when they're doing everything right. Thank you, Madam Speaker.